and we have become sort of numb to them. We have normalized corruption, we have normalized scandals, we have normalized thefts. It's become so normal when you repeat and repeat them over and over again, and nothing happens. What we are doing and what we have done is to mainstream corruption to a point where it has become virtually legitimized. Maybe the word corruption itself, and may have to be looked at, because from a psychological standpoint, it seems to have gained a certain legitimate currency. That if someone calls someone corrupt, it's not a really big deal. The word stealing and the word theft still are pretty much unacceptable, and so I wouldn't want anyone to call to say to my son or daughter, your father is a thief. I wouldn't want that. But I wonder if someone says to my son or daughter, your father is corrupt. I believe I'm not corrupt, but I wonder if I would want to spend my money chasing after that person for compensation by way of defamation. So I think words matter. I remember many years ago when female circumcision used to be called female circumcision. It wasn't working until the name was converted by the UN, female circumcision, to female genital mutilation. And then suddenly the practice ceased. So perhaps we want to look at that in terms of the nomenclature that we attach to the name.
That's why here on Newsfile, we decided not to call it irregularities, but misuse and theft. And the procurement part, we know that procurement is just a pseudonym for corruption, stealing.
Correct. I think names matter. And, kudos to multimedia for starting the campaign in terms of the proper use of words to create an impact and for people to change. As the World Bank estimated many years ago, more than 10 years ago, that Ghana loses an amount of $3 billion every year to corruption. More than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
My conservative estimation is that perhaps we're in the bracket of 4.5 billion now. So we're losing all these sums, and then we are with the IMF for a program that stays in the hand of government from undertaking certain social policies that takes care of vulnerable people in our society. So we have major problems, and we don't seem to, address the fundamental problems that actually undermine us as a country. Now, I just want to make one point, because my colleagues have spoken to that. One point, and I hope that point addresses this. Our laws still have the law on causing financial loss to the state. Now, I would like to respectfully remind us the reason that law was passed. The reason that law was passed, among others, was to rectify a certain procedural difficulty in the regular criminal code or regular criminal act. And that procedural difficulty is meeting the high threshold of establishing intent when you are making a claim of theft. And so if you are bringing a claim of stealing against someone, you'll have to establish that a person dishonestly appropriated something to himself and to his benefit. In respect to the law on causing financial loss to the state, you don't have to establish any such thing. Once we can show that your conduct has resulted in a loss to the state and that you acted willfully, willfully doesn't mean with a deliberate intent to do something, but you acted with discretion. You acted voluntarily. Once you acted willfully and your action or conduct has resulted in a loss to the state, you have acted in a manner that has caused financial loss to the state. All these irregularities we speak about, all these thefts that we speak about, the question is whether the persons involved acted willfully and therefore whether they were exercising the authority of their office. I think that we have to begin taking action on these things. Otherwise, we are creating perverse incentives for people to indulge in things, knowing that these things pay and that there's a benefit, and the benefits do not come with consequences. I think humans are rational. The economists tell us humans are rational. They calculate their odds. If the odds of doing something is fundamentally in my favor, if I do the cost-benefit analysis and it balances on the side of benefits, I am incentivized to act in a certain direction. If it balances on the side of a loss, I will have to calculate my odds carefully before I undertake a particular transaction or before I act in a certain direction. I think that we've gotten to that point where increasingly every year people have come to that conclusion that the most that they will suffer is a degree of public opprobrium when they appear before the Public Accounts Committee, and then they speak to all kinds of things that shock the conscience of the country. The panel at the Public Accounts Committee will express their disdain and unhappiness. The whole country will complain perhaps for a week or two. and then we move on. And so people have come to realize that there are no consequences. And the most you're going to have to suffer is to deal with the public perception, which at most is probably going to last for just a week or two. And people are beginning to calculate their odds. And in balancing the odds, they've come to a conclusion that it makes a lot more sense to indulge in what you're going to indulge in and to become perhaps rich for a long time to come and pay a next to nothing price. It makes all the sense for you to do that. As I indicated, it surprises me, for example, in the case of the World Bank and even the IMF, the fact that the World Bank estimated that we lose more than $3 billion per annum, which as I've indicated, is more than 10 years ago, perhaps we're in about 5 billion, as of now, 4.55 billion. They've indicated we lose all these, but somehow they have, in some ways, still not invested heavily in closing some of these gaps, but will rather take us through programs from time to time, which also then optimize our debt portfolio with them. And in the end, they are still commercial entities. They make sure that we pay. I mean, nothing given us is for free. We have to pay because they have to respond to their shareholders. So it's important that we come to that conclusion that there are tools and rules here. We just have to implement them.
Thank you. My final question to you, from the perspective you are coming from, action, enforcement, is this: that over the years, these reports are sent to Attorney General, they are sent to IOCO. They kept saying, let's set up a specialized court. The Chief Justice set up about 12 courts so many years ago, and they were still complaining. Even members of Parliament on the Public Accounts Committee still did not even know of the existence of this, and they were still complaining at a time when these courts has already been set up. Do you think that perhaps the Auditor General should now begin to send these reports to the Office of Special Prosecutor rather than AG and the IOCO, where we know there is some complicity sometimes because of the parties that are involved? After all, OSP is now the, if you call like, the focal anti-corruption institution we have set up.
Well, indeed, I totally agree with you. The OSP is a specialized body, however, and we'll just have to look at the Act. It has a threshold jurisdiction on some of these cases. But once it meets the threshold, and the figures you're mentioning clearly go beyond the threshold in some ways of the OSP. So yes, I certainly do agree. But the problems at the OSP are not different from the problems at the Attorney General's Department, and would have to address these problems cross-institutionally, because it's a combination of things which include capacity. Look, the truth of the matter is this: persons who indulge in corruption are often persons of means. That means these are people who can also afford the best of legal services. And the truth of the matter is that legal practice in Ghana survives not only on the strength of people's cases, but it survives on the ability of lawyers to exploit the system in ways that advantages their client. And often these are through delays. So delays and frustrations, and very quickly cases die down. So for example, the difficulties of securing witnesses, forensic and auditing capabilities of the office involved, the ability to undertake proper discoveries and be able to garner the requisite evidence before a court of law in a way that will adequately convince the court. And above all that, to overcome that big difficulty of one single reasonable doubt thrown at the case by the defense. So it becomes so difficult very often to prosecute these cases when one is dealing with perhaps poorly or underpaid legal attorneys at the Attorney General's Department or the Office of the Special Prosecutor, who are going up against very well-paid and highly motivated private attorneys who are defending. So the private attorney is well-paid, and he also has a lower threshold job, just to throw in one doubt. The public attorney is probably underpaid and probably under-resourced and doesn't have the requisite complement of auditing and forensic capabilities in conducting the case, and is also having to meet up a very high threshold of proof before them. So sometimes you have these imbalances, and they tend to undermine the cases of the state. And when you have acquittals, then our spirit is further dampened, the extent to which we want to further pursue these cases are diminished.
Thank you,
But
Prof.
we'll have to invest in this if we have to make progress against this moving forward.
Thank you, Prof. Abotsi. We'll take a break here. A message by Kofi Bentel says, reason for our graft is a culture of perverted mercy. When people have to be punished, we invoke this perverted mercy and let them off. Even chiefs beg for them. Unfortunately, lamentations today are a repeat of our annual ritual since independence.